Opening code, individuals.
Want to welcome everyone to this community town hall. So we have prepared, actually, a couple of people on this panel have prepared, or on the planning, have prepared a town hall digital toolkit. This toolkit could appear overwhelming when you get in there. There are two sections. One's for parents and advocates. The other section is for organizations. In the parent advocate section, I'm just going to draw your attention to there are three nice, easy, clear steps on things that you can do. And I'm seeing all the little anonymous characters pop into the Google document. Love to see that. Those are just real key doable steps for you to take action and make sure our voices are heard. For partnering organizations, there are a wealth of links and resources to make sure that you can supply your organizations with good factual information and impact. And so there is a two-part to it, but there's a lot there. Don't become overwhelmed. Bite-sized chunks. And take one action. That one step brings us all a little closer to being heard. So with that, I will turn this over to I believe, Rebecca Renshaw, and she will give a few remarks from our hosting organization here.
Thank you, Shank. Yes, my name is Rebecca Renshaw. I have the privilege of serving as AER's president, and we are very proud to host this evening's event focused on the community town hall as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of Individuals with Disabilities Education Act. Thank you all for being here. Your presence certainly reflects the strength and the heart and the commitment of our community. It's hard to believe it's already been 50 years, right, for IDEA. We celebrate tonight the partnership between federal and state partnership that has brought us to this point and has affected generations of children with disabilities, and work together tonight to move forward into the future as well. AER invites you to be part of that. I'm doing a little plug here, and I hope that everyone will really take this to heart, the impact that you could individually make. AER has invested with advocacy platform called Speak For, and it gives us a way to collectively share our voice with legislators on important topics such as IDEA and the U.S. Department of Education, for example. It's super easy. It takes 30 seconds for you to share your voice and our collective voices to make an impact. So if you're not familiar with Speak For and the campaigns that we've been doing through AER, please check out our website to learn more about that. Our latest campaign is actually about this very topic that we're discussing tonight. You can also find a link to that campaign in the digital toolkit that Sean had mentioned as well. We are really focused, AER, on honoring the past and the people that fought so hard to make IDEA a reality 50 years ago. And we're taking stock in the present and what's working and what's not working. And then we're trying to shape our future together. And we really need your partnership for that. We're honored that we have a number of individuals with us tonight demonstrating their partnership in our efforts for this evening. I'm going to go over the agenda briefly and then introduce those sponsors. For the agenda for tonight, we are going to, as I mentioned, introduce the sponsors. Then I'm going to pass it to Amy Parker, who will introduce our panelists. They will respond to three topics related to IDEA: celebrating, learning, and action. We'll then move to a Q&A session where we received questions in advance, and finally close out with a call to action, and again revisiting that digital toolkit that has been put together for all of you. So I'm going to start first by acknowledging our sponsors. Each of these organizations have their own story related to IDEA and their history of advocacy, innovation, and leadership, and we're honored to partner with them for this event tonight. Those partners are the Council for Exceptional Children, the DVIDB, the Division on Visual Impairment and Deafblindness, ACVREP, and Success Beyond Sight, Orientation Mobility Specialist Association, Vision Serve Alliance, National Family Association of the Deafblind, Charge Syndrome Foundation, Portland State University, and American Foundation for the Blind. We have 3 representatives from those sponsoring organizations here with us this evening that would like to say a few words. I'm going to first open it up to Kuna Taliban, Senior Policy Director for the CEC. Taliban, if you could, Kuna, if you could say a few words.
Sure. Thank you very much. And it's nice to be here with everyone. For folks who are not familiar with the Council for Exceptional Children, our organization is now more than 100 years old. It's a membership organization that represents special educators from pretty much every part of the profession. And a lot of our members are really proud of the work that they were engaged in 50 years ago to insist on the establishment of the federal law to ensure the education for kids with disabilities. We've had a lot of time over the last year in our kind of our legacy leadership to reflect on what it was like before and after the enactment of that law, and heard a lot about what it took to do the initial child find, how educators were creating public service announcements, going door to door, telling families that they knew you can bring your kids to school now, and what it was like also at the same time to build a field, right, to professionalize a special education field. And I think our members are really proud of how far this field has come, and we're looking forward to ensuring that the law continues to be well funded, or hopefully someday it will be well funded, continues to exist, and that we build on the progress that has been made over the last 50 years. We're engaging in advocacy in a lot of different ways, from working with the lawmakers on Capitol Hill who fund the law, to doing outreach to our members and to the the broader kind of community to make sure people know how important this law is, and that that it sustains well into the future. So I appreciate, and on behalf of CEC, we appreciate being invited to participate and support this town hall to celebrate the last 5 decades of special education.
Rebecca, you're on mute, my dear.
Thank you. What I did say was thank you, Kuna, for those words. Appreciate your support and partnership. I'm going to now pass it to Justin Kaiser, who's going to speak on behalf of the Orientation Mobility Specialist Association.
Thank you, Rebecca. So I am Justin Kaiser from the O&M Specialist Association, and we are an organization that represent certified orientation mobility specialists, people that have the credential of National Orientation Mobility Certification, and guide dog mobility instructors. And I think it's something where I've noticed, especially through the professional development sessions that we've had, anytime you're talking about O&M for children, IDEA is something that always comes up if we're advocating for the need for instruction in community environments, if we're advocating for that we have to maintain the high standard for certified professionals, even when we're dealing with personnel shortages. And that just really falls right along with what the O&M Specialist Association is designed to promote. And just really want to thank AER for bringing the focus to IDEA for this. So happy to be here and support what 8ER is doing.
Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful to partner with you. Finally, I'm going to pass it to Stephanie Neert from, I hope I said that right, Stephanie, from the American Foundation for the Blind.
Yes, you did. Thank you so much for letting me join. It's actually a little bit emotional for me to join, particularly today, because I'm wearing a lot of hats. I'm obviously here representing the American Foundation for the Blind, and for the entire span of IDEA's existence, AFB has been, sitting there attempting in various ways to continue to support, continue to, better or enrich that kind of tapestry that the IDEA sits within, to fight on behalf of people who are blind or low vision or deafblind and improve those experiences. And some of the other things organizationally that AFB does is really enrich a lot of the scholarship that so many of the people that are practitioners and scholars and those preparing the next generation of, TVIs and O&Ms through the Journal of Visual Impairment and Blindness. The scholarship in this journal is a journal space that really helps shape, educate, and communicate throughout the field, and has been doing so for well over 100 years. It's a journal that's a labor of love within AFB, and so it's part of the tradition that we hold in this space related to education. But we also do more mission-driven research too, and some of the more recent research was an access and engagement series that we did related to educational experiences, and we're always interested in tracking the current political threats and threads, and, really truly where our civil rights sit in the broader federal landscape, and continuing to find ways to advocate and push on behalf of people who are blind and low vision and deafblind. But the reason I started this with a little bit of personal sentiment is because it's a piece of legislation that has personally touched me as an individual who's blind, and who became blind in high school and had to quickly sort through getting my own IEP. And literally tonight, I am working on behalf of my daughter, who I'm walking through the IEP process tomorrow, and using my knowledge and the framework itself to fight for her educational rights. And so I just feel like it's a bittersweet moment here. I'm literally toggling between being here and outlining my objections. And if that's where someone who is very much in the fold related to the educational rights is sitting, it makes me wonder where the countless parents of children are who may not have that access to, their own civil rights information, their own knowledge of the system and how it works, and what that means for those students. Because I will say, as a law nerd, this piece of legislation is a really well-crafted one. It has some good teeth to it. And I say that because if parts of it are under threat, I think it's worth all of our collective effort to fight for it staying intact. And so I will get off my soapbox. I was only given 2 minutes, but I'm so glad to be here, and thank you so much. And happy birthday, IDEA.
Thank you, Stephanie. Wow, a great example of the our collective community and all the hats, all of us together wear, that we need to work together to move this forward and appreciate the past, identify where we are now, and come up with our collective plan to move forward. So thank you for sharing that. Thank you for all of our sponsors. Appreciate the partnership. Looking forward to the continued partnership. I'm going to pass it now to Amy Parker, who's going to introduce our panelists who are joining us this evening.
Oh, hi. I have some esteemed panelists here tonight, and it's nice to see all of you here joining us from across the country. So it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Joshua Milay, who is a blind scientist, designer, author, and disability scholar and MacArthur Fellow. Josh has created so many tools that people use every day to make their quality of life better. I'm also excited to introduce Sarah Chatfield and her son, Jack. Sarah is the CEO of Sonia Biggs Educational Services, Inc. So providing services across the country, overcoming some of those personnel shortages that we hear so much about. Sarah is also a teacher of students with visual impairments. And Jack is a high school sophomore who reads print and braille. Also, it's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Larry Wexler, uh, Director of the Research to Practice Division of the Office of Special Education Programs for the U.S. Department of Education from 2010 to 2024. So we have some wonderful panelists tonight who will each be addressing different topics, and the three questions are related to celebrating, learning, and taking action. So we will start with the first question, and just pulling up my notes. The question is, how have you experienced or witnessed IDEA making a difference in the lives of learners with visual impairment or deafblindness? And we'll start with you, Josh, to address that.
Great. Thanks a ton. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, everyone, for being here. Happy birthday, IDEA. And my name is Josh. I'm a blind scientist and engineer and designer of technology for blind people. I do all sorts of things related to making the world a little bit more accessible. And I grew up as a blind kid. And so I think the main thing that I'd like to underscore about IDEA and the way it impacts people is that we think of IDEA as being a policy and law that impacts blind and deafblind and low vision children, but we grow up, and if we have a solid education, if we're supported in our success as students, we have the opportunity to become successful adults. And I've been lucky enough to be able to have a very exciting career designing and developing technology that supports other blind people, from students to professionals, in doing the things they want to do. So in my own life, I have obviously been IDEA has been a powerful force in my own life as a blind student. 50 years ago, I was entering first grade, and I was not in a school for the blind. I was in a public school. I was mainstreamed in PS 102 in Brooklyn, New York, in first grade. And it was an extraordinary experience for me and for all of my classmates, starting in first grade and going all the way through 12th grade. And IDEA gave me ready access to the Braille materials I needed, the tactile graphics that I needed, and to the mentorship and successful teaching from my TVIs and my other teachers that I so needed. So I can't I can't overemphasize how important IDEA was for me and my student and career success. And of course, I am part of a broader and very supportive and essential blind community. My friends who are blind, my mentors who are blind, my colleagues who are blind, all of them were benefited from IDEA in some form or other. And if we are going to have successful blind adults, we must have our blind students set up for success. So that's, I think I'll stop there and let others speak.
Thank you so much, Josh. Thank you so much for sharing the personal lived experiences you had. Larry, we'll turn it to you. And I know that you have had a storied career in special education. If I had taken the time to read your bio, I might still be talking right now. So tell us about your own experiences and what you've witnessed with IDEA.
Well, thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I might talk a moment or two longer than Josh. Told you earlier it takes me 5 minutes to say good morning. So, let me start by saying that I started teaching special education in 1970. And that was 5 years before 94 142. And at that time, more than 1 million children with disabilities, including blind and deafblind children, were simply excluded from public schools. And quite frankly, it took the law to change that, as Josh mentioned. I retired nearly 2 years ago, and I certainly miss the people I worked with at OSEP, who were by far the most incredible group of people I've ever worked with. But one of the advantages of being retired is that the filter is off. I can't be fired, quite frankly, and so I've been able to do a lot of press because I can speak on the record, and I will say that one of the things I characterized what's going on out there. Relating to the deafblind TA centers when they closed a number of them. The word I used was despicable. That got some press, and so I think you get an idea of where I'm coming from. When I worked, I was working in the District of Columbia Public Schools, teaching at the time before 94 142. When the law passed, the school district admitted that they were excluding 12,000 children. And so, IDEA changed all of that. It gave access to kids with disabilities under the law. And that can't be underestimated, but certainly more was needed. IDEA allowed us, through funding, to create a systems approach to supporting the field. For instance, the personnel preparation program, the doctoral program. Our doctoral program was a doctoral leadership program. Most of the people, we used to, at meetings, say, if you went through an OSEP training program, raise your hand, and the whole room would raise their hand. I think it's so critical that IDEA allowed us to do what I call a multiplier effect, which was we funded the production of doctorates. Those scholars who became doctors, most of them or many of them became faculty. It's the faculty that do the research to develop evidence-based practices to be employed by teachers with children, to actually not just give them access, but to ensure better outcomes. But it's also that same faculty that prepares service providers to provide direct services. OSEP has devoted a huge amount, quite frankly, a disproportionate amount of funding has gone to low incidence disabilities. We used to get complaints about that fairly regularly, but the bottom line was the money went to the greatest need, and that's what we did. We also supported personal preparation, innovation. So many of you, and I know Rebecca the Sheffield's were part of the original doctoral consortia that focused on blind and visually impaired and deaf-blind. That was an incredible innovation that needed IDEA support. And I will confess to you, I wish I could say that was my idea, or even my staff's idea. But the reality was the blind community came to us and said, we have a proposal to do things differently. And we funded it, and then we continue to fund it and to support it. So that was an innovation that's been applied in the realm of behavior, in the realm of literacy, and it's been a great model that was developed with IDEA funds. With IDEA funds, we also supported a sort of systems approach to technical assistance and dissemination. So we have TA centers, but understand our TA centers, we didn't, I have to use past tense. We didn't look at the field and say, there's a bunch of empty heads out there. We know the answers. We're going to fill their heads. Because we didn't. The people in the states and the IHEs and the local school districts frequently had strong ideas also. So our TA centers also were engaged in knowledge development as well as knowledge dissemination. We didn't have all the pedagogical answers. The reality is my predecessor, Lou Danielson, and now we're going back a long way. Lou had a saying, the school, regardless of the research, the school bus pulls up every day and lets kids out at the school. So sometimes you just have to go with your gut and use those TA centers to actually develop the knowledge. Part of that system were national coordinating centers. So, we have one for the parent network, and certainly we've had a long-standing one with the deaf-blind network. And that's been a great model because it leads to efficiency. It leads to not 50 centers developing a guide to NCLB, for instance, but a single center developing it and then disseminating it to the state centers, and then the state centers customize it to the needs of their state.
Larry, let me jump in. You have such a rich tapestry, and we were warned. We were warned about you, that you had so much to share, and truly, there is so much to celebrate. You have addressed the celebration pieces so well. So we're going to save some for your next response and turn it over to Sarah and Jack now, who can talk about their own celebrations and what they've lived in. And by the way, kudos to you, Jack, for coming on with your mom. What a great thing. You're a very courageous dude to do that. I know that my son probably wouldn't join a panel with me at this time in his life, but welcome, Sarah and Jack, and please share.
Yes, thank you. So with the IDEA and the IEP that it grants me, like without that IEP, my just getting through school would be a lot harder, especially. So I feel like I have pretty good grades now, but without the IEP, I don't know if I'd be able to get those. And so last year, in my freshman year of high school, I had to take a PE credit, and without the protection of the IEP, they would have thrown me in a class where they would be doing stuff like badminton and pickleball and all that stuff with the really tiny flying objects, and I'd be graded on that stuff. So with the protection of the IDEA, they were able to move me to a weightlifting class that, like, I still learned a lot, and I got my PE credit, and stuff like that is why I think the IDEA is really important. And, like, just helping me getting through school, and just helping me ensure that, like, all my teachers are giving me the support I need, and that I'm getting the tools I need. So like a magnifier and getting stuff enlarged so that I can actually read it, and just getting extended time on tests too is pretty important. And without all that, like, getting through school would be so hard, and I would have a lot less time to do other things like extracurriculars. I'd have to, like, use a lot of that time just to catch up to all the other kids instead of
That is so great.
doing the things I want to do.
I think that we talked a little bit about it yesterday when we were talking about these questions, and like Jack is involved in team sports and he's protected under those extracurricular activities too. We have great coaches where we live, and so we're grateful for that. They're very inclusive, but if he was having to come home because mom had to make everything accessible for him so that he would have access to those materials and maybe do some reteaching. And he's lucky that he has a kind of crazy mom in that way who would do that. But what was it about, to Stephanie's point, what about the kids who don't have, whose parents are working 3 jobs and or single parents, or like they're contributing in a different way. We all deserve education like this. And I'll tell you, when Jack was born, I had never even met a blind person before. And through the IFSP process, I was able to get all the training that I needed to set me up for success. And then later I was able to go to school under the grant programs that Mr. Wexler was explaining. I am a product of those grant projects. And I also have contributed to research about Braille literacy and how like COVID affected our adults with blindness and deafblindness. And the other thing I think that the IEP process does is Jack runs his own IEPs,
Mm-hmm.
and it makes you practice those advocacy skills that you need. I see you nodding, Josh, that you're going to need when you go to when you go talk to your HR person at your job, or for accessible materials, for accessible access to do your job, when you go to do the doctor and you're asking for like accessible information about your rights as a human. Like these are IDEA gives you permission to take up space, and it's not based on a teacher being nice or not. It is your right. And I think that that's something that Jack and I spent a lot of time talking about yesterday.
So much to celebrate. So much. Thank you so much for adding to that celebration. And weightlifting sounds like a lot more fun than pickleball, and probably more relevant to, being a sophomore in high school as well. So
They're lucky.
yeah, absolutely. So we're going to go on now to our next theme, which is about learning. And I think we all learned so much from Larry's last response. And Larry, this is going to start with you. It is, what is something that you wish people knew about education for kids with visual impairment, or knew something more about kids who are blind or deafblind?
Well, I think I'm going to go a little broader and just say in terms of kids with disabilities. And, IDEA is the only individual based entitlement program supported by the government, the federal government, the only individually based entitlement program. And what that means is that each individual child is entitled to the services and supports he or she needs to be successful, regardless of the cost or convenience or type or severity of the disability, including deafblind children, including blind, visually impaired, but including intellectual disabilities and kind of right down the line. As such, some of you may have heard me say this before, just because a child has a low incidence disability does not mean that the child's education should ever be a low priority. And so I think what people need to know is parents, like we just heard from, need to continue to demand services and supports for their children. How's that? That was a brief one.
That was really good, Dr. Wexler. Thank you. So turning back to you, Sarah and Jack, what is something that you wish people knew more about with the education for kids with visual impairment or deafblindness?
So yeah, building off what Mr. Wexler said, Dr. Wexler. So I've felt like sometimes that I've been treated as if I am completely blind, and that's not true. I can see, and I can definitely see enough to get around. So like the individual, like different kids have different levels of blindness and different types of blindness that need different services. Like it's not just blind or low vision, like, or a bunch of different disease that manifest themselves in different ways and all that. So just individually treating, or being able to individually treat or help with each type of disability is really important if you want the best outcome for the kid.
Yeah, and I'll just quickly say, I think teacher prep programs are so important, the funding for this, because, just a quick plug about CVI, um, that's overrunning our field. We have to have more people ready to serve. And I think there's a background noise about how central auditory processing disorder interacts with CVI, and that maybe some of these kids would be benefiting from a deaf-blind approach. And we don't have a lot of that necessarily in a teacher prep program, a lot of time to invest. So if we defund these things, it makes what we do so much harder, especially when we get out into the field. We're overwhelmed with all the things that we have to know, like on day one.
Absolutely. The individualization, you all followed up on what Larry said just brilliantly, that it isn't a one size fits all. It is very individualized. And then the individualization with CVI, with kids who are deafblind, with kids who have different levels of vision, different levels of hearing, different access needs, just brilliant. So let's turn it over to Dr. Mile. Josh.
Thank you. Yeah, amazing points, everybody. I love, Jack, I love your point about sort of every blind person is kind of marginally different. Some of us are very different. Many of us are, even those of us who are totally blind, we have different, we all approach things in different ways. The individualization is super important. And yet we often get treated very similarly. And the way that we do get treated is with lowered expectations. And I think that if I were to, there are three things that I'm going to sort of mention about what I wish people knew or did differently. And I'm not a policy guy. Like, we're talking about a policy, a law. And I'm really much more able to speak to the experience of students and professionals who are blind. And I think that the lowered expectations that are often, as a result of basically ableism, when you lower expectations on a blind kid, you're not doing anybody any favors. You're not doing the kid any favors. And I think teachers, I have a great deal of respect for many teachers, but I think other teachers often are overwhelmed and are looking for ways to make their load a little easier, and lowering expectations somehow seems like a possible path to an easier track for everyone. And it's not. It makes it harder for everyone, including especially the blind kid, but for all the kids that see that teacher lowering the expectations, or parents or whoever is doing the lowered expectations bit, the people that, the way that we spoke about IDEA teaching everyone, and the fact that a successful kid with a disability in a mainstreamed environment is raising expectations for everyone. It doesn't happen if the kid isn't held accountable. And the same thing is true of the teachers. When we train TVIs to prepare our blind students, we can't lower expectations on them either. We're not doing anyone any favors by raising the quotas on emergency credentials, etc. We need prepared TVIs to prepare our blind children for success. That's point number one. I'll be quick on the other two. Braille is not dead is the second thing I would want people to know. If you are blind and you are somebody who Braille will help, then you will not succeed in a technical or STEM field unless you know Braille. I know that there are people who do, there are people who try, but in fact, if they did learn Braille, they would probably be even more successful. So Braille is an essential tool. It's not, some people think that technology is replacing it. It's not. Braille is still and will continue to be an essential tool for literacy and for manipulation of equations, etc. Finally, tactile graphics are a thing that have not been emphasized enough in the education of blind kids, particularly in STEM fields, or in teaching geography, or in teaching in anything where spatial relationships or graphics or informational, infographics are used extensively, and STEM is the sort of the biggest one there. So without tactile graphics, children, students, and professionals are at a huge disadvantage. And unless you learn to read and use and benefit from tactile graphics early, you will not be able to benefit from them as a professional. So those three things: expectations, Braille, and tactile graphics, I wish people knew more about.
Those are all frontiers, and they're all things that you have contributed to, Josh, extensively. I think people are using some of that spatial knowledge with the many tools that you have created, and I know it's important for orientation and mobility as well. Our last theme for the evening really is taking action. We know that IDEA has been under threat somewhat indirectly through the challenges to the role of the U.S. Department of Education. And so for IDEA to live and thrive, we have to take action. We have to take action now for the people that are using it today, as Stephanie's daughter is using it for her own access, as Jack is using it for his access, the kids who are in school right now, as the bus is picking them up, as Larry said. But what action do we need to take so that it exists and is vibrant in the future? And what is the role of the U.S. Department of Education in the implementation of IDEA? So our final question, and we'll start with you, Sarah and Jack. What recommendations do you have for people here who are listening tonight who want to ensure and expand access to learning for kids with visual impairment and deafblindness? What recommendations do you have?
Okay. So I feel like a good way to expand on and my mom can talk more about ensuring it, but I think a good thing we can do to maybe expand it in the future is like just make sure more of the extracurricular activities are covered. And I think there's something out there that covers them, but I was in cross country my freshman year and last year, but I had a lot of problems my freshman year because the courses weren't marked that great, and there was not a lot the South Carolina state government there was not a lot the high school league was doing to protect me on that. Like they didn't really have any policies or anything to help with that. So like the coach was worried about going to talk to the people because he just thought they might have just said, yeah, you got to tether him to another coach who run beside you, and that could make running the race harder for me. So
He did not want to be tethered.
yeah. So just like
So adapting the course is what you're saying, having proper adaptation to the course, to
or
materials. Mm-hmm.
providing a map or something beforehand to study. Sometimes I get it, sometimes I don't. It'd just be more helpful if those kind of accommodations for sports and were more standardized, I guess. And some sports is good, like wrestling. They have rules in place, and the rules work well. And wrestling is good. Cross country was the one I was struggling with.
Got it.
And yeah.
I think I know I'm speaking to the choir here, but like the expanded core curriculum is so important, like rec and leisure. Just don't, I know we have, I think Justin here from O&M, like O&M is so important. We are cycling through all kinds of things to make sure that running is fun and safe so that he can run for the rest of his life. And I'll just build on kind of what Jack is saying and what we've talked about already. If we don't take care of these kids now, the state we pay for that. As they become adults, they are dependent upon the state. We leave these kids vulnerable to whatever whims and funding is available. And I'm not going back 100 years to that. We're not going to do that. We invest now and early into these children, into their education, and we reap the benefits for years. Dr. Mile is a scientist who's contributing not only to science in general, but making like things accessible for more people. And I want to grow up in or I want my kids to grow up in a place where seeing someone who's using ASL, who's using a cane, who is using a wheelchair is normal and accepted, and we celebrate the things that make us unique. And I feel like IDEA does that for us. And if we don't protect it, then it feels like we're going back in time and things are going to get so much harder. And like things are not easy now.
Right. They're not easy now. The fight is still on. All right. Thank you so much, Jack and Sarah. Let's go to you, Josh. What recommendations do you have for taking action?
Thanks so much. And yeah, I'm just thinking about what Sarah and Jack were saying. I guess I want to point out that laws and IDEA as a law, laws are like locks. It's often said that locks are things that keep honest people honest, but they don't keep dishonest people out. And laws help us remember what we should do, and if we're all doing the right things, then we're within the law. But really, what the idea of IDEA could be summarized by saying, hey, teachers, don't be ableist, right? Don't discriminate. Be creative. Think about what the student needs and provide an appropriate set of teaching and, an appropriate teaching environment, materials, etc. for each student. But we can't trust people to know what to do. We have to sort of lay it all out. We have to codify it. We have to sort of go into excruciating detail. And wouldn't it be great if people would just be a little bit more self-motivated to just do what they should be doing anyway, as motivated educators, to make sure that everybody gets what they need. And I don't want to be Pollyanna-ish. I don't want to say that that everybody, why can't we just all get along? But I do think that very often teachers and educators, administrators, etc., at the school level really don't understand disability. They don't understand what they don't understand why. They don't understand how. They don't understand what the lived experience of students with disabilities is like, or how very often they don't even understand how a student with a disability could possibly succeed. So I think that one of the things that we really need to do is lean into the why of IDEA for teachers, administrators, and other people who are we often may imagine are on the other side of this. Make things, if we can, less adversarial. And if there are ways to make everyone more motivated to help students succeed, then that's going to be better than any kind of sort of adversarial struggle. Not that we don't need to be adversarial. Sometimes we do. But if people understand why and how and are motivated, intrinsically motivated for students to succeed, that is a powerful, powerful tool. So number one, I would say, any way you can, think of ways to enlist the collaboration of teachers and administrators. And that's going to be different for each school, for each student. Number two, I want to encourage people to think about ways to bring disability community into schools. When there's just one disabled student in a school, they're alone. But when there's a disabled community connected to a school, that's a force that is very difficult to push back against. So it doesn't necessarily have to be one of the national blindness or disability organizations. There are often cool local disability or blindness organizations that can be collaborators, can come into schools, can help motivate and teach teachers and administrators why and how. So that's those are my two suggestions. And again, not to say that the stick isn't sometimes necessary, but maybe it's nice to find other ways if you can.
Thank you so much, Josh. Larry, what actions would you have us take? And I know you're a man of action who's created so many things from a federal level at different layers, but what action do we need to take now? And you don't have to be careful in what you recommend.
You know, number one, I recommend always taking a strength-based approach, not focusing on what people can't do, but what they can do. But I know this is about IDEA, but I want to say something about NCLB, the No Child Left Behind Act. NCLB taught us you treasure what you measure. Under NCLB, a school, a district, or a state could not be successful unless all subgroups, racial, language, and disability, were making adequate yearly progress. All actually meant all, and that had a profound effect on schools throughout this country, and it directly affected the disability community because they were being counted for the first time, included in state and district assessments for the first time, and their results mattered. My recommendation is to refuse to accept any limitations that a school, a district, or a state, or the federal government attempts to place on children and students. You know, you only get one chance with your children. You've got to trust your instincts and remember. And Josh, here's where I might depart from what you had to say. Remember, your goal should not be to be liked, but rather to get your child the services and supports he or she needs to be successful. I worked directly with Judy Human for many years, and I'm echoing what she would do. She never worried about whether she aggravated people. She worried about people, including herself, getting the services they needed. And to echo Mark Twain, you never can go wrong by doing the right thing. And we know the right thing, and we need to insist that it be done.
Well, I just want to thank all three panelists. We're going to shift now quickly for the sake of time into some Q&A. And I just want to say that this has been recorded, and I'm glad because I want to savor what our panelists have shared with us tonight. All four of you have been really thoughtful in your responses and contributed to this wealthy perspective on IDEA. So celebrate it, to learn from it, to learn now, and to take action to continue its future. I'm going to read actually some of the questions that have come through. We did get one question in advance, but I'm going to read a question that has come through in the chat. One of my biggest concerns about the threats to IDEA is the possibility of moving OSEP to HHS. I think this will lead directly to the reemergence and view of a disability as a medical model versus a social model. And this will lead to lower expectations and fewer opportunities to prepare learners for adult life, including a work life and a work engaged in community. What can we do to push back on this type of move and to amplify the strong reasons why IDEA belongs in a strong Department of Education? Just an easy question, light question to start off.
I think I'll take a quick swing at it. I think what you can do is vote. Vote for people that aren't going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack, Sarah, any thoughts on what you can do and the Department of Human Services, Health and Human Services versus the U.S. Department of Education as a home for IDEA implementation?
We're not muted now. We talked a little bit about this yesterday. People like Dr. Sheffield, who are in the Department of Education, who are diluted down, and we're again not at the like mercy of whatever is whomever is in place at that moment, and that to add an incredible level of stress from a national perspective of what is happening. And like Jack, just because Jack has accommodations and we have the IEP in place, it doesn't mean that he doesn't have to work a little bit harder, a little bit longer, a little bit more intentionally all day long. And the noise that comes in with having, I mean, with having to think about how our lives are going to change, and then the minutia of it is overwhelming. And again, to vote for someone who understands and has empathy for people like Jack, or for parents like me, would be fantastic.
Thank you. Thank you both. Larry?
I don't know. I don't have, words of wisdom in terms of this. I mean, we're living in a era of chaos and confusion. I don't have a magical answer, but let me just say, and education used to be in HHS when it was HEW, Health, Education, and Welfare, when special education and rehab was in the Bureau of the Education for the Handicapped. Okay, it wasn't until the Department of Education was started that DEH was moved to the new Department of Education. So it is not impossible. It certainly isn't ideal. And I don't want you to misconstrue what I'm saying. It is not ideal that OSEP move to HHS, but it is not impossible that they'll be able to function there. Now, it depends on where they're lodged and who is over the particular area that they're in. On one hand, there's some pretty radical people with some interesting points of view in HHS right now. I don't think there's any doubt about that. On the other hand, OSEP could be lost at HHS, not worth the effort, and essentially function kind of independently and continue to do what's right. What you have to have confidence in is they have not really fired. They tried to fire a bunch of OSEP people, but, in the last budget reconciliation, that was all restored. But there were no other firings, whereas in other offices in the Department of Ed were completely gutted. I mean, Institution of Education Sciences basically has 3 people in the National Center for Educational Statistics. So if they move OSEP to HHS, it's likely that most of the people are going to go with that move. And the people at OSEP are incredible, gifted, smart, dedicated people, and they will do the right thing. So I would have some confidence.
Okay. We are not going to be able to get to all the questions this evening, but there's another one that's somewhat related to this. If the Department of Education is closed down or reduced, will this mean that special education services will be determined state by state, with mainstreaming IEPs in one state and potential lack of services in another state? Will they be administered through the residential school for the blind in another state? So it's kind of another question about how will things be handled with this massive change.
One of the one of the great fallacies in the current administration's policy is that education doesn't need to be returned to the states because education is with the states. You know, there will always be a massive variability in services to all kids, including kids with disabilities, across states, as well as across districts, as well as across schools. So, you know, anything is possible. They don't really have a plan, as far as I know, but the law, they can move the Department of Education, they can move OSEP, but the law is still the law. They will never be able to repeal IDEA because it requires a supermajority in the Senate, and it can't happen.
That is comforting. That is comforting to many of us here tonight.
You know, I've been wrong on many occasions.
Well, any other thoughts from you, Sarah, or from you, Josh, about changes? So no from Sarah and Jack. Josh, any comments? No. Okay. Well, one other question that came in ahead of time was about the schools for the blind and their role and how changes in funding would affect the schools for the blind. And I know that Dr. Renshaw, the president of AER, actually is a superintendent at a school for the blind, and we pinged her about this. Rebecca, I don't know if you're able to chime in at this time.
I am. I'm still here. I'm at my school for the blind right now in the residential program, covering for the evening. So, coming live from Western PA School for Blind Children. So I appreciate you passing the question on to me. It certainly is discussions having amongst the schools for the blind. Curious about how this will all affect staffing and services that we offer. Also, if there's some discrepancies in funding between, again, states and federal, things like that change, and there's more discrepancy among school districts, will there be an increase or decrease in the schools for the blind? Unfortunately, there are no clear answers. What we do know is that some kids benefit from services at a school for the blind, and that's the least restrictive environment for them and the ideal environment. All students, all kids benefit from a continuum of services guaranteed under IDEA, and certainly from the resources that OSEP provides for teacher personal prep programs are vital for schools for the blind. So I don't have clear answers, but I hope that answers the question.
Absolutely. I think just the national perspective and the investments that OSEP has made in our field, the products that have been created. Josh, I know that you've been a part of the innovation and partnership with many different partners to innovate and create tools that can be used by everyone. And that, Sarah, you're also a part of carrying on the tradition of providing personnel, right? And providing personnel in innovative ways, regardless of geography. So again, I want to thank our panelists tonight. I'm going to shift now and turn it over to Sean Ticoon, who is going to talk to us about how to take action this evening.
Thank you very much for that. And I'm going to just jump into returning to what we started with in the beginning of the evening. And that is that we have this town hall digital toolkit. For those of you who had the fear of missing out, you saw that QR code and now you're inspired and you're like, oh, if I only had it again. Pull out your phones, scan it now. That toolkit is still available, and hopefully you guys will find some resources in there to add into what we've heard this evening to give you that next step. In addition to that toolkit, AER has been making use of a new platform called Speak4, where AER supplies ready-made letters for representatives to be sent out with like a single click. And you can go in and edit it. For those of you who want your own words in there like me, You can go in there and make some edits here and there, throw something in specific to your state, like I do for North Carolina. But the Speak For campaigns are a benefit and are something that we have been promoting throughout. If all of a sudden there were 200 emails tomorrow morning in representatives' boxes, and all of a sudden representatives in the area of education and health and human services that are working on staffers are like, did you get email from this thing? Did it look like this? What's going on out there? We would attract some attention. We would attract some questions. Timing is critical with a lot of these things. I heard one time, I believe it was at a project director's meeting. I believe Larry was possibly on stage at the beginning of it, that some people sheepishly admitted that one letter was anecdotal and two was data. I don't know if that's entirely true, but I did hear it at a project director's meeting from a representative sheepishly admitting how few letters could really enact some serious change. And then finally, the last thing that we're asking is, and I know, guys, this is a lot. Please, please, please open these in separate windows, save them for later. This really matters. For those of us who helped plan, organize, and pull these things together for this particular session, we need to know what you want to hear or what inspired you or what activated you so that we can then speak to the rest of the field. There are many of us across the nation, but we have knowledge gaps. We have things that inspire us that others don't. Those of us who organize this are some of those doctoral people. We are data-driven policy nerds. We are all activated by that. If that's not the way to get people energized, those of you throughout the state, those of you that are parents and advocates out there, please take just 5 minutes to fill out this survey to let us know what really made a difference for you, what really activated you, and what you want to know more about. And that will help us as a group and as organizations. We're happy to share those results with the organizations that, and I'm speaking maybe out of turn, I hope we are, but that helps all of us make sure that you're better equipped as professionals, as parents, as advocates out there.
Closing code. ACT. ACT. Act.